concealed in the active self-protection extra channel. And today we have Mr. Jeff Gonzales, who I've just had the pleasure of meeting.
Yes.
And he's willing to do an interview with us. I got to sit in on a session that he did yesterday about training standards, and he said a few things that really piqued my interest, and I thought we'd ask him some questions. So we'll do that when we come back.
Pepper spray is next generation OC spray. It's hot at 1.4% major capsaicinoids, and its modular design means you can customize it exactly to you. 3 different setups, lots of different color combinations. You can make it exactly as you like. And the flip top safety prevents accidental discharges. It's 10 to 12 foot range and 25 half-second blasts. Make sure that you can keep that long range eye poke at long range. I trust Palm OC, and I recommend it for everyone for self-defense.
Welcome back. So, Mr. Jeff,
Yes.
would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and perhaps a bit about your background, and then why did you choose to speak on this topic today?
Sure. Jeff Gonzales. I am the CEO and founder of Trident Concepts. My background comes from Naval Special Warfare. Spent the better half of my life there, East Coast, West Coast, as an operator and instructor. Trident Concepts is a nationally recognized training company. We've been around for 20 plus years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So the question about why did I choose to talk about training standards? So, as you know, coming from a very elite organization, we live and breathe by performance, and performance is based around meeting a quantifiable standard. So when I moved from the special operations community and into the public sector, I did not know any other way to train or to share the knowledge and experience that I had other than through sharing the importance and the backing behind standards. We use the term performance standards, training standards, however you want to look at them, or just standards. But it's always been something that is just second nature to us. Anytime we're doing any curriculum development, we always begin with the standard and we work our way back,
Yes.
which is very different from what most everybody does.
You begin with the end in mind.
Correct.
And then, yep.
We backfill the curriculum. Yeah. So, I see in the industry a lot of, and I'm sure you see this to some extent as well, how sometimes we are more about how we feel, the feels, right? Not so much the real work that we need to do. And unfortunately, the only way that we're going to do that is if we have a way to measure it. And so that's why, that's whenever we do any of our instructor level, we actually have blocks of instruction in our instructor level program that talks about standards, the
Measurable
integrity,
outcomes,
how we get there, why they're important, why as an instructor, appointee, you want to be able to do this, and the reason why you will support it, and all these other kind of like little tidbits. So it's a very, very important facet. I would say that if you were to poll people that have been through our training programs or work with us at some point, and you would ask them to give you some sort of value behind their experience, most of the time it's going to have something to do with how hard the training was. And the reason why the training was hard is because of the standards. Or the fact that they recognized that they weren't where they thought they were.
Sure.
And the reason for that, right? The reason for that was because of the standards. The standards were there for that. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Awesome. Do you train mostly for your instructor level program? Are you training mostly military, special forces, law enforcement, or private citizens?
So our instructor program is we have two different ones. We have some that are geared more towards the government side of the house.
Okay.
And those are the only reason why they're different is because we have to. The government has certain requirements that we have to meet in order to conduct training for them. It's all about the bureaucracy side of the house. So it's a little different on that end.
Sure.
So I much prefer doing the open enrollment instructor courses because we don't have to jump through those hoops.
Sure.
And so we can provide a much better product to the consumer, to the instructor that's attending. So yeah, we do them for both. If I had, I would love to do just the open enrollment without all of the federal oversight that we were required to do.
Doesn't necessarily always pay the bills,
No.
though, right?
No,
Especially in a poor economy and that sort of thing.
So I enjoy doing them both because they're both very valuable. They're both important. Are they the same? The outcome is still the same, but the format and how we achieve that is a little bit different.
What is different in that as far as the measurable standards? So as far as private citizens, what are you looking at as far as helping instructors develop standards for the responsible citizen as opposed to having standards already there?
So great question, and the way that we would answer that is very simple in the sense that there really isn't a difference.
Okay.
Right, because it doesn't matter who's behind the trigger. There's still the fact that they have to, the results are still going to be the same. They have to utilize deadly force to stop an attack.
And they have to make good decisions with the gun.
Exactly. So it's pretty much the same. And as far as like creating a standard, unless we are required to, like we've worked with certain agencies that say, all right, well, we try to influence them towards our standards, but we are limited because they have existing requirements that we cannot move away from. So that's unfortunate, but we work within that. Sometimes it has to do with the target size, sometimes the target type, sometimes those are kind of considerations for us. But the purity of the standards on the open enrollment side is the part that I love the most, because we're not beholden to anybody.
Sure.
It's just the way that the standards have evolved over the years. It's the beautiful thing about it is that you are going to know where you stand, not in relevance to me, but to yourself.
Right.
And that's why I think that's the magic behind it, is that most people will find value in that and say, I'm not as good as I thought I was, or I actually am.
Yes.
And I have that level of confidence to go with it. So that's what I think is the magic sauce.
Okay, I love talking about this sort of stuff. So
Good.
This
I love
is
it
good
too.
stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned a quote, or not a quote, but a stat in class yesterday, where you talked about, I'm just going to say the 50 to 55%, and I'm going to let you take it and explain it from there, because I don't want to butcher it.
No.
I couldn't stop thinking about it last night.
So we've got the question, where did the target size come from that we use? And the target size that we come from is 8 inches. So it's 8 inches with any weapon at any distance. And where did that come from? Well, first it kind of, it's the general average for anatomical features and stuff like that. But the reason why we maintain I think the people that have come to our classes can speak with experience about this, that 8 inches to us is that it is 8 inches. So the lines, the target line that we have is actually, it's outside of 8 inches.
Okay.
So when you measure the target line, the actual, the line itself is outside of 8 inches. So if it hits the line, it's a miss.
I love that. You're the first instructor I've ever heard say that.
Yeah,
And
it
that makes
really
sense.
rubs people it rubs people the wrong way so often. I've had conversations. This is like one of the single greatest complaints that we have in all of our. Oh my God!
Kidding.
People blow up on they'll post it on
Goodness
social
gracious.
media, debriefs, after actions. This is one of the most common complaints that people make. Is like, he doesn't include lines. If you hit the line, it's out. It's such bullshit. It's so crappy.
It's so silly that they're so worried about that little thing.
True. And what I find to be, that's one part of it, right? Is that they're focused on the wrong thing, right? In our I think, you had mentioned something about, one of the quotes or one of my comments to people, like, hey, if you hit the line, stop bitching about it and just be better.
Yes, I love that.
So that's the key, and that's the point that we try to get across. But so the reason behind that 8 inches is there's twofold. Number one, it's about the size of the anatomy, the vital anatomy. But number two, in a stressful situation, so like when we've polled our guys that have had multiple deployments downrange, and we've asked them, what are your thoughts on your hit ratio? What do you feel like you're doing? Like, and what do you feel like? Where do you feel like you need to work?
Okay.
And the biggest reply back a lot of times was, I feel like we're good. I feel like I'm good. I don't need it. There's not like a chink that I need to work on, other than like little things. Sure. But for the most part, there's not something I need to work on. And the reason for that is because they know that if they're able to guarantee 8 inches in peacetime, that the belief is that there will be about a 50% degradation in skill, given them a 12-inch target in a combat setting. So under the stress of combat. So you can see your target, your shot grouping expanding from 8 inches to the 12 inches, which is still on a man-sized target a good stop, a good type of stop. So that's the big reason behind the 8 inches, is that it helps us, if we can guarantee, if I can give you the confidence to know that you can guarantee 8 inches in peacetime, then under a stressful situation such as a defensive gun use, you know that you have the skill to deliver the rounds as needed. So that's kind of the history behind it.
Did you find that information out yourself, like through the people you asked, or is that something, the 50 to 55% degradation, or is that something that is commonly available as far as literature and that sort of thing?
There's not anything that I have found in the literature. This was just through. So my experience in knowing what I did and then talking to other people in my generation that had similar experiences, and then talking to the current generation of frogmen and what they did and what they saw. And that's kind of without leading them to it, I just ask them, like, what do you think your hit ratio is, or what do you think is happening there? And like I said, the vast majority of them, more than half, just kind of like they shrug their shoulders and like, I think it's like half.
Okay.
It's just like,
they're probably pretty accurate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because as they kind of reflect on it, they just start thinking it's like, okay, doing some quick math in their head, and then they're just like, so it may not be perfect. It may not be, defendable in a court, like how this
gives us some at least place to start.
Yes, and because there's the argument. Well, that's an actual combat theater. That's an offensive operation, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. You're right, it is. But then it even makes it more valid for a defensive scenario, because in a defensive scenario, we're dealing with surprise, we're dealing with unpreparedness, whereas in an offensive, it's more based on we're dictating the terms, we have that. So if we're seeing that 50% degradation, then it's probably going to be worse in a surprise setting. So all the more reason why the standards are so important.
Yes. Oh, I love that you talk about these things.
Yes.
This is good stuff. Okay, last question for you about this is one of the things we find as we're training, we were just at the Girl in the Gun National Conference, and other situations like that, just in regular classrooms, we'll find that our students are tend toward perfectionistic tendencies.
Okay.
And how do you help them understand that if they've met the standard, if the standard is 8 out of 10 at whatever distance, whatever time, and whatever target size, how do you help your learners understand that you've met the standard?
Right.
We're not asking you to exceed the standard.
Right. Here's
the standard, and that's it. Doesn't matter how far above it you are.
Right.
This is what it is.
So I don't like to use the term minimum standard, right? Because that has sort of like a negative connotation.
Yeah.
So when we're describing this, like when I see a student that is like making a concerted effort to be well above the standard, there's usually a compromise in that, right? So in other words, in order to, if the standard had you shooting 4 inches and you're nailing them inside of a 2-inch standard, then the compromise is that you've had to adjust your training to accommodate that smaller shot group, right? So that's not what I'm asking, right? I'm asking, so sometimes they'll think, well, if he's wanting 4 inches, 2 inches is better. Yes, there are times for that, but we will specify exactly what we want to see from the students. Like, I want 4 inches. If it's inside of 4 inches, that's all I care about. I don't care if it's inside 2 inches, something's changed. So the curriculum is designed around, we want you to be able to shoot 4 inches, which is about the size of a head, right? So if you're trying to shoot to a smaller target zone, 2 inches, that becomes unrealistic for that target size, because now the speed, the speed that they have to give up to be that precise is unrealistic. So I don't want you to exceed the standards at the sacrifice of not following the task conditions and standards that we set forth. So if the par time is 3 seconds, and you're able to shoot a 2-inch group inside that par time, even though the requirement was 4 inches, okay, great. You have exceeded the performance attributes of that drill. That's a different story. But if you're over the 3-second par time because you're trying to shoot these tight little grips, then you're not understanding the requirements. And so that's more of a communication error.
A conversation about it.
Right.
Telling them the why behind it.
Right,
and
exactly.
helping them understand that.
So the way that I try to sync that message in a lot of times is that, who are you shooting that for? Are you shooting that for yourself, or are you shooting that for me?
And often
so it's a lot of times they're trying to shoot it because they're trying to impress me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's nice, I appreciate that, but I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed by that. If you want to impress me, shoot to the standard.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
Yeah, if you shoot to the standard and you're able to meet that standard, then I'm going to challenge you with a new standard. Right, we'll modify the training requirements so that you're constantly having to reach to the next ladder rung, that you're never really stagnant. Because when you're stagnant, that's when bad things start to happen. You get, you're kind of like, we use the term like, most dangerous weapon in the world is a bored frogman. So when you become bored, you start to create bad habits, and those habits become inauthentic as far as your training is concerned, and they damage all the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So we try to keep them away from that, and a lot of times that's on us, the instructor staff, to make sure that we're doing that. But ultimately, once we see the light bulb click and they figure that out, it's usually a one and done.
Okay.
We don't have to have that conversation
Again and
over
again and
over
again.
over.
Okay. So letting them know the why behind it answers their questions, and they're able to do what's being asked of them.
In theory.
But more likely than doing it that way than
Yeah.
constantly having to have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And so
that doesn't help them either.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say about standards too is that the industry is not accustomed. When I say the industry, I mean all people are not accustomed to having standards in their in their training.
Okay.
They're used to doing it they're used to doing it by the feels.
Yep. Yep.
So when we have these standards in place, and I'm not talking about a standard for a drill, I'm talking about standards for your entire curriculum, right? And so when they're involved in that, sometimes like a lot of times people that come to our training classes for the first time, it's a culture shock.
I bet.
Because they're being held to a standard. There's accountability in place.
Wow.
They have to address those issues. They have to look internally to figure out, because once I tell them what they're doing wrong, we've identified the problem.
Yeah.
The hard part is for them to take ownership of that and make the changes, right? So the accountability of maintaining the standards helps them. They either like continue to butt their head against the wall, or they stop and they realize, oh, wait a minute, if I did it like this, I get it now, and the light bulb moment usually happens. Not often on the day one, but a lot of times on day two.
Sure, and I'm guessing you have a lot of repeat learners. Once they understand the difference, in the culture, and that accountability, I think as instructors we should be holding each other accountable.
I have people come up to me every time I do any public appearances. I will generally have at least one person that comes up to me that will say something like, I went to a training class. I had a guy who came to a training class in like 05. And he's like, it just really, and he later moved on to work for the police force, moved up to the firearms training unit, and his comment was, the way that what you instilled in me back then transferred into the way that I look at my work, and ultimately when I ended up in the firearms. So many people have come back to me and they just say, thank you for the standards, thank you for holding me to those standards. We have people, like I'll have people that'll come to me and just like, I had one student, I think he had the highest number of classes that he came to was like 13.
Wow.
Yeah, 13 in about 8 years time frame.
Wow.
So multiple year type visits. And I finally pulled him aside and I was like, listen, I really appreciate you coming. It's great to see you, but you need to be getting out there and seeing other instructors.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's like, no, I do that. And I'm like, okay, well then why do you keep coming back? He's like, because your standards are so repeatable that I can evaluate my training over the year by coming to your class and finding out, okay, did I do a good job? Did I not do a good job? Because this is a known. So we're known on that horizon that people will use this as like a way to validate what they're doing, what they're doing on their own. Because at some point you can't just go to training class. You have to start to take ownership of the training.
That's right.
So they are experimenting with what they're doing, and then they'll come and they'll test it, and they'll, that didn't work, or okay, I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And so that was another eye opener. I was like, wow, I never thought of that.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Sure.
Because that's the other thing. We don't, the program, the standards are not going to change. We've maintained those. The integrity of the standards is the other thing that's so very, very important.
Wow. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
My
Dave.
pleasure.
Thank you for your time.
Oh yeah,
we
of course.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Okay.
Good luck with everything.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you next week.